Yesterday we started our statistics unit, and the focus of yesterday was being able to find a 5-number summary, and from that 5-number summary being able to create a box plot, or a box and whisker plot, and be able to find our minimum, Q1, median, Q3, and our max. We also went into histograms a little bit and being able to identify those. Alright, so today what we're going to look at is one of the other standards in Math 1 for statistics, which is comparing data. And we're going to be using the same calculator buttons that we did before. Now, yesterday when we started looking at these, all we really did was, we put our list of data in L1, we found our one variable stats, and we scrolled down a little bit so we could see the minimum, Q1, median, Q3, and our max. So now we're going to go through and talk about some of those ones that we skipped over when we scrolled down. Now in Math 1, when you're comparing different data sets, there's only a handful of things that they're ever going to ask you guys to compare. One of them is the mean. Now when you go into one variable stats, so what you'll do is you'll go into stat, calculate, or sorry, same thing I did yesterday, edit. I'm going to put it in there first. So we'll go into stat, edit, and we're going to put our data in L1, and then we'll go into stat, calculate, and it's number 1, which is the one variable stats. Okay, so one variable stats, which is again the first one. And it's going to put a whole bunch of data on there. And the first thing that pops up is an X with a bar on top of it. That is your calculator symbol for the mean. Okay? So that X bar, they'll have an X bar equals and they'll have some number there. That's the mean. So that is one of the pieces of data they could have you compare between them. They could say, what's the difference between the means, or which data set has the largest mean, or something like that. Just a couple places down from that, they're going to have, you'll see this symbol which is an S with an X. That is your standard deviation. Okay, so that's your standard deviation. So it's kind of easy to remember that one because it's an S, the symbol for it at least is an X. So that's another thing they could ask you to compare. They could say, what's the difference between the standard deviations, or which one has the smallest standard deviation, or something like that. So you just need to be able to go, into your one variable stats and just identify that. The other thing they can ask you to compare is your median. And we found the median yesterday when we were doing our one variable stats, or our 5-number summary. So that one was easy. And the only fourth thing that they'll ask you guys to compare is your IQR. Remember, that's our interquartile range. And your IQR is whatever Q3 is minus your Q1. So again, your 5-number summary, when you go into the one variable stats, it'll give you your Q1, your Q3. You just have to take Q3 minus Q1, and that's your IQR. So when we're comparing different data sets, these are the types of data that you're going to want to write down. You'll go through and you'll plug in one set of data, one variable stats, write down the mean, standard deviation, median, IQR, which is your Q3 minus Q1, and do that for both data sets, and then just answer whatever question it is that it has. So if you need anything from the screen, go ahead and get it. I'm going to clear it off, and we're going to look at 2 different data sets. So let's say, usually they're set up in tables. I'm going to say data 1, so maybe from like store 1, and data 2. Data 1, let's say, is 86, 90, let's say 84, 72, and 106. And data set 2 is going to be 85, let's say 80, Okay, I'm going to fix that. It looks like an 8J. That is a 5. There we go. 80, 89, 91, and 100. Okay, so for each data set, we're going to go through and find our pieces of information. So you want to go into Stat, Edit. We're going to put Data 1 and L1, and then go back into Stat, Calculate one variable stats. So take a minute, pause the video, and I want you to go through and try to get your one variable stats for just Data 1. So put Data 1 into your one variable stats, and pause the video. Alright, so hopefully you've gone through and plugged those in. For data set 1, so data 1, okay, you should end up having a mean. Again, the X bar with the symbol over it, that's your mean. That's 87.6. Standard deviation, 12.28, I think. Yeah. And then my median, I had 86. And again, the only other thing we have to find is your IQR. IQR is your Q3 minus your Q1. So my Q3 for this example was 98. My Q1 for this one was 78. So 98 minus 78 gives me a 20. Okay. So that's for data set 1. That's my mean, my standard deviation, my median, my IQR. And you're not always going to have to find all of them. Just kind of read through your problem, and it will normally ask you a question, what's the difference between the IQRs, or what's the difference between the standard deviations? So you'll kind of know which piece of data you need to find for them. Alright, so go through and plug in your data set 2 into L1 and try to find your one variable stats. I'm going to put them up here for just a second, so go through and pause the video if needed and try to see if you can find these answers. Alright, so data set 2, I'm going to go through and delete out my table. So again, if you need anything, go ahead and get it. I need a little more space for myself here. I was writing a little bit big. Okay, so let's say for data 2. When I plugged those in and found the one variable stats, I found my mean to be 89. I found my standard deviation to be about 7.45. And I found my median to be 89. And I found my IQR, again, which is my Q3 minus my Q1. And my Q3 for this data was 95.5. And my Q1, which is 82.5. And so if I subtract those two, I get 13. Okay, so this is all of the data for those. So on an exam type question, again, it will just somehow have you compare your data. It could say, what's the difference between our means? Well, the difference between 89 and 87.6 would be 1.4. Or, what's the difference between the medians? Well, between 89 and 86 is just 3. Or what's the difference between the IQRs? Difference between 13 and 20 is 7. Something along those natures. So really the big thing is just being able to plug in your data in your calculator and get your statistics, your mean, standard deviation, median, and IQR, and then just be able to answer the question to them. So with those, make sure you're working on your homework today for those. If you didn't, most of you didn't finish yesterday, so make sure you work on that. And keep in mind that your homework question also has a review to start getting you guys ready for your exam.